Hello ladies and gentlemen watching this video, welcome to Talking About Stuff with Dan, where I'm Dan and I talk about stuff. Okay, well anyway, I haven't done one of these in a little while, but it's not been like a year, it's been like a few months. But I wanted to discuss, well, what the video title probably is. I mean, I don't have an official title set yet for, obviously, as I'm recording this. But, the whole Super Mario 64 versus Super Mario 64 DS debate, and how it seems like a majority of people seem to prefer the N64 version, which I personally think it has something to do with nostalgia, but you know, I don't know for sure. I mean, it seems like it because it's a case for a lot of things, but you know. Anyway, let me get into it. So unless you've been living under a rock, even then you probably heard about this. People seem to really like Super Mario 64. They liked it at launch, and they still like it today. And I can agree to a certain degree that it is still a very good game. It's still very fun. I'm not a big. It hasn't aged, obviously, and like the N64 version hasn't aged in the graphics. But that just seems obvious. Not aged graphics don't always hold me back. It just depends on what it is. And they really seem to like the game, and the physics, they aren't the best. I never thought that they were all that great. I mean, you had to start somewhere with 3D games. That was the first truly 3D Mario game. But like a few years later, like not even a decade, like almost a decade, but in 2004. The DS was launched, and the launch title was Super Mario 64 DS. Obviously, it's the N64 game, but on the DS. So you know, put two and two together, and there you go. Anyway, so what they did with that game was they improved on a lot of stuff. Some things that were a little questionable, but there's a lot of improvements in the game. There was like somewhat in the physics, somewhat in the there's a lot of things, the graphics, and they added a lot of stuff, whether, you know, good or bad. I mean, I think most of it is good, but there were a few questionable, if I can get the words out right today, there were a few questionable decisions. Well, a lot of people seem to, even after playing the DS version, seem to still prefer the N64 version. And now think, okay, maybe, you know, there's certain reasons for that, but like, I don't know exactly what it is other than nostalgia. Now I can understand to a certain degree. People say it's because it's a 3D game, and when it came out on the N64, it was built around the N64 controller. So using the stick on the N64 is better than using the D-pad on the DS, which usually tends to be the only argument or the biggest argument about the Super Mario 64 DS, which when it on the outside it sounds like, yeah, that sounds like it would hinder it. Like they may have improved in a lot of areas, but the D-pad is just really holding it back. Well, a lot of this is going to be my opinion, by the way, but I know for sure that there are some people that kind of share my opinion, or at least similarly. There's a lot of like okay, like I said, people prefer to use a stick in a 3D game over using a D-pad, which is completely understandable. The thing is, though, even the N64 version kind of felt like it was meant for a D-pad anyway, or at least could work also on a D-pad, because I don't know, it's just how should I explain this? When you actually play the game, this is something you kind of have to experience to really get it, but I'll try to explain it the best I can. The DS honestly feels, I don't know if I should say better, but at least to me it does. it does feel better, honestly, at least to me, like I said. Because it feels like it was built around using a D-pad. I mean, even you can even look up on like Digino Gaming and stuff, and just stuff from the past. The Mario 64 was originally going to be, well, obviously not Mario 64. It was originally going to be on the Super Nintendo to really show off the Super FX chip, and like have a full 3D game on the Super Nintendo, which means that unless it had some special controller that was going to be coming out for it, you would have to use a D-pad to move Mario around. And when I play even the N64 version of Super Mario 64, it feels like it could work with a D-pad. It may not be the most comfortable, but it feels like it could work with it. Whereas the stick kind of, well, I don't want to say the stick is bad, but it's, it works too. It feels like it could go either way. So when I play the DS version, it feels just right. Even if you got that thing where it's like, oh, you press on the side and it just feels kind of awkward doing that with a DS game. Excuse my coughs. Sorry about that. But it just feels right. But people seem to always think that, like, oh, this completely obliterates the game and causes it to be a bad port and all that stuff. That couldn't be further from the truth. Like, okay, the reason I bring this up is because just today, as I'm recording this at least, I watched a video another video talking about the Mario 64 DS argument. When this guy was, I can't remember the guy's name for right now, but he was bringing up points about like what they did differently and why the DS version is worse and all that stuff. I will go ahead and say that he brought up some good points about it, like the questionable changes come in the fact that some missions or some added stuff, like he pointed out positives too. He didn't go in there just completely destroying it. He pointed out some positives too. But some questionable stuff that was understandably questionable. Like I agree with that. Like how they added some stuff that just doesn't feel as necessary, or like the fact that in the N64 version Mario had all the power-ups, and whenever you got them you just had to use them with Mario, whereas in the DS version there's multiple playable characters, and there's some stars you can't get to without having to go all the way and switch to those characters. Now, of course, he also pointed out there's some levels where you get certain hats, or you can have certain hats, and if you can get to them, you're like, say if you're using Mario and you have to play as Luigi for a certain thing, you can still do that. But then, like with the hat, not having to go all the way and switch to Luigi. And by the way, you do have to unlock those characters. It starts out kind of differerly, but just look it up. I'm not going to go too much into it. But basically, I think there was a lot of good ideas for the DS version, but there was also some things that were kind of like, But the argument that he ultimately concluded with is the DS, just the controls hindered it. While the DS can handle 3D games, it doesn't, or like in terms of the hardware, like it can support it. It doesn't mean that it's very good on there, because it's the D-pad. And that's why there was a lot of 2D-ish DS games, either 2D or just touchscreen only, whatever type of DS game. Which, fair enough, yeah, I agree with that to a certain degree. But like I said, I didn't feel any problem with playing the DS version, whether on the DS, the 3DS, the Wii U Virtual Console. It just felt right. It didn't feel like they just completely, you just unplayable and stuff. To me, honestly, now this has to do, I'm probably about to sound hypocritical with this, but it may have to do with the fact that I don't like the N64 controller very much. And I know I'm not alone in that, but I know that like there's a lot of people that would like to use the N64 controller. I mean, if you grew up with it, you know, you got nostalgia and all that stuff, which is understandable. I got nostalgia for a lot of things. I can't say that I'm not nostalgic for some things, but I realized this with Conker's Bad Fur Day, that I just can't handle the N64 controller that much anymore. Not that I can't handle it for any game, but it also depends on the game too. And for me, Mario 64 on the N64 or the Wii U Virtual Console, whatever, which I know isn't. I've heard that like it just doesn't feel the same as the N64 controller. Well, to me, it hasn't aged very well at all on the N64. But I love playing the DS version, and to me it's just so much better. It's like it's okay. I watched XL Paradigm Gamer, if you know who that is. I've mentioned him a few times. He did a whole video on Mario 64 versus Mario 64 DS on his remake or rebreak show. So if you don't want me to spoil it, go ahead and pause it and go watch that, although it is like an hour long, or like almost an hour long, if not exactly. But he brings up a lot of good points. He points out the negatives of, you know, both the remake and the N64 version and all that stuff, the positives, and he usually gives it from a scale of replace at its best and re-break at its worst, and then, you know, remake if it's like not the best but it's still, you know, pretty good, and then re-meh if it's like not the worst port but it's still not a very good port. He's only done like a couple of re-breaks, and I think like either 2 or 3 replaces, and spoiler, Mario 64 is one of them. Mario 64 DS, I mean, is one of them. As in, he says, you know, replace the N64 version with the DS version. He didn't. Now he did go on to say that he doesn't mean that you can't play the N64, you know, the other version, you know, and you can't enjoy it and it can't be your preferred one. It's just that when he compares the two, he's like, you know, hands down. He's basically saying hands down. If you were to ask me, I say, you know, I say the DS version is the definitive version, which, my personal opinion, I agree with him. So, yeah, it's just when you actually get around to playing it, it's fun. It's great. And if you were to ask me, I would say, yeah, play the DS version. But there just seems to be so many people out there, so many YouTubers and stuff that say, oh, this is one of the worst ports of any video game because this. And I'm like, that's it? It's kind of like the argument of what's better, the N64 version of Conker's Bad Fur Day or the Live and Reloaded version of Conker's Bad Fur Day on Xbox. And a lot of people point out to the N64 version, which I can agree with certain things about it, but when I really got around to playing it again, both on the N64 version and Rare Replay on the Xbox One, I have to say that that Live and Reloaded has aged way better. Not that I think that Bad Fur Day is bad. It's the same thing with Mario 64. I don't think it's bad on the N64. It's just I prefer the other version over it now, and like just, you know, and if you argue about the DS's 3D thing, like how it can't really handle 3D games that well, which I can agree for the most part. But another example, maybe not the best example, but another example is Rayman DS. Which is Rayman 2 on the DS. It's very similar to the N64 version of Rayman 2. So that's a fully 3D game on the DS. I had no problem with it. I could sort of see why people's arguments, if they say, which I haven't really heard that much of, but I could see why they wouldn't like it as much, you know, having to control 3D on a D-pad. But it's not as bad as you think, basically. Like, if you were to say, would you prefer using a D-pad on Super Mario 64 over a stick, I would say no. I'd say I would prefer using a circle pad or anything that can do more degree of movement rather than just up, down, left, and right, and you know you got to press 2 of them to go in the other directions. I would prefer that, but I don't have a problem with the way the game is designed and the way the D-pad is designed. Now the DS, the original DS, the original model, with the you know, where the D-pad was much wider or much bigger, I can agree that might have been a little bit, you know, for the game. You know, maybe hold it back a little bit, but I still don't think it just completely hinders it. And as much as people like to say that, but I see so many lists of you know, with YouTubers saying like, oh, it's bad. It's, you know, when really you just gotta have an open mind for it. You gotta go in and, you know, you gotta make your own opinion on it. Which you know, you could argue that like, oh, you know, they can say their opinion, that's fine, and I agree. And it's just up to the people to whether they listen to them or not. Well, the thing is, a lot of people do listen to them, and yeah, that is their own fault, but it's not the YouTuber's fault. But the YouTuber knows this, and they still don't really. A lot of them don't really go in depth about why they don't like the DS version. They just say, "Oh, the D-pad." I don't know. I probably just spent like nearly a little over 17 minutes explaining something that I could have just explained in a couple of minutes, but I wanted to kind of explain why I think the DS version of Mario 64 is better than the N64 version. And it's not just the added mini games, it's not just the added stuff in general, it feels better, and it's a portable Mario 64. I mean, unless you play the Wii U Virtual Console, that's a little different, but I still prefer it. I can understand some people's arguments with some things, but I can't say that just using the D-pad is just completely hinders it. To me, it's better. I like the Mario 64. I would prefer Mario 64 DS over Mario 64 on N64 any day. I mean, you had to start somewhere. Obviously, it got its name from the console it was originally on. And at the time, I'm sure it was really great. I didn't grow up on it. I grew up on PlayStation and not N64. I didn't get an N64 until like the mid to sort of late 2000s. But and I like it. I can still play some games on the N64 controller, but I can't use it as much anymore and really enjoy some of these games that a lot of people seem to enjoy. So yeah, I don't know. I like the DS version much better, and I feel like if you're a little hesitant, and you're hesitant to buy it, it is actually pretty cheap. It's probably the cheapest to find it on the Wii U Virtual Console if you have a Wii U. I'd say get it there, because there's also a D-pad. If you want to know the D-pad feeling, it's general. I'm looking at it right now. It's generally like a DS D-pad, or like a DS Lite D-pad or DSi D-pad. So yeah, just give it a try if you want to take a chance on it. I mean, if you don't want to spend that much money, but you also have a Wii U, get it on the Wii U Virtual Console. It may not be just the absolute way to experience it, but it's enough. And even whether on the DS or whatever, it's a really great game in my opinion. And you should give it a shot if you feel like you want to, but you're a little hesitant because all these YouTubers are saying, oh, it's worst port. Well, if you want a better explanation of it, go to Exo Paradigm Gamer's review of these games. But anyway, thanks for watching this video, and hopefully I explained it very well. I know I repeated myself, but I do that in a lot of my videos, so you gotta bear with me. And thanks for watching. Like this video if you want to, subscribe if you want to, and I'll try to make more of these and still flesh them out a little better. These just kind of happened at random. But anyway, that's about all. Thanks for watching.